Hey everyone, it's Tom Seymour with VHS Massacre. I figured I'd do a quick update. It's been a while since I did a little show, but typically I tend to want to wait for something interesting to happen. I really haven't been cranking out content lately in regard to just talking about pop issues and pop culture and stuff like that. So basically what happened recently is that the original VHS Massacre premiered on Peacock TV, which is a prominent streaming site, obviously owned by NBC Universal, and would be one of the major streaming platforms. So what's interesting about this is that the origin of my documentary, VHS Massacre. So I kind of want to walk you through what happened here. But I want to frame this in a way that kind of makes, for any of you that are independent filmmakers out there and are thinking that it's impossible to make a cheap feature-length film and have it go anywhere and have it do anything and be successful, I want to let you know that the first VHS Massacre was a $500 film. $500 was all the cash that we laid out for that film. And so how does a $500 feature film, first of all, how do you make a $500 feature? And then second, how does that end up on Peacock TV? Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a few things, a few templates, if you will. So before I talk about VHS Massacre, I want to talk about Exorcism of Fleet Marish. Initially, the film was called Mark of the Beast, but recently I put out a new cut of the film, and I think it's really cool. So Exorcism of Fleet Marish is an example of, it was a feature-length film. I think at the time we bragged that it was about $6,000, but ultimately, I mean, you could say it was under $10,000. Maybe 9,000 is the most accurate number. Though when we started shooting physically, it was $6,000 as the amount of cash on the table. But by the time the feature finished, it was really looking more like 9-ish. Okay, so but how do you make even to have a budgeted $6,000 film? What does that look like? Well, one of the first things is, ultimately, you have to have a lot of friends who are interested in filmmaking. You have to have locations that you can have for extensive amount of time, where you could stay there for free. And then the script really has to be catered to that. So you have to really think like an underground filmmaker, an independent filmmaker. When you're writing, when you want to make a film, a micro budget film like this, you really have to write that way. So Mark of the Beast, it was all basically a sort of cabin type of location, and people stayed there was these little cabins all around the property, so people were able to stay on set. It was pretty awesome. So that being said, write for limited locations. Either one central location where you can pick up a bunch of additional locations, very, very short travel or even walkable from what the initial location is, and then try to set dress and make other locations out of the same location, things like that. Have a small cast, a limited cast. In our case, we had 2 stars, Debbie Rochon from the Troma movies, and we had Ellen Muth from the Dead Like Me Showtime series and the film, the Dead Like Me film. And the way I was able to get Ellen Muth cast, I'd been doing this for a decade or so, decade and a half. Now it's going on 25 years, but this was about 10 years ago. We used IMDb. We put out a casting call on, I think, Backstage and then IMDb, and a few people reached out to us, and we heard Ellen Muth was interested, and we're like, well, if you want the role, you can have it. And so basically I don't want to go into details, but you could say her day rate was very good, but we only hired her for a day and a half. It was like she showed up on set in the afternoon, I think, the first day, and then we shot all of her scenes through on the second day. So her day rate actually was pretty good. We did have to do a bunch of paperwork with the SAG, because there's these ultra low budget agreements that you can sign up for. So we did that, and so basically we made the whole film schedule around Ellen to be able to shoot all of her scenes quickly and consecutively, and we built the whole schedule around that. It basically was, I believe, 11 days of shooting. It was 10 days in a row, and then we had a weekend date, like a month after the shoot, to do some special effects shots, some pickup shots. So I think this template absolutely works. You can use even 9 days. I've done this on several features. Basically, let's say you have a day job, like most of us do. So what happens is you take a full work week off, a Monday through Friday off. You get prepped on the Friday before the week off. You start shooting very early Saturday, shoot all Saturday, all Sunday. Then you shoot Monday through Friday. Then on the other weekend, you shoot all Saturday, all Sunday. And then you can maybe even add a Monday in there if it's possible. And if not, then what you do is you set up the weekend down the road, a month from then or whatever, when you've recouped. You can, gotten some sleep and all that and gotten back to work. You could plan out a Saturday, Sunday for pickup shots. And what that gives you is 9 days plus 2 days, 9, 10, 11. And you can absolutely shoot a feature in 11 days. It's tough. You have to actually keep a light crew and move fast, and you might not get every shot you ever wanted, but that's kind of how it is. So we did Exorcism of Fleet Maris. That's how we did that one. And, I think it came out well. I used the same technique with my first 90-minute feature, Everything Moves Alone. That was a $9,000 film, so very comparable. And we basically did the same thing, same template, except we did test shooting beforehand, and we used the test shooting in the film. So we had a weekend before, and then we shot the 9-day schedule. So I think that was like a 10-day shoot, something like that. Atlanta College Prophets is another movie I did. I don't think it aged very well. It's sort of a silly Troma type backyard superhero movie that we shot in 14 days on about $14,000 if you count the camera. So honestly, that's $10,000 plus the camera, so. So this can be done. I've done it repeatedly. Atlanta College Prophets was sold to York Entertainment, distributed in, I think, about 10 different countries, like Italy, Spain, Thailand, Germany. So anyway, that's how you can do that with feature-length films. I'm not saying you're going to make a lot of cash if you're trying to get a distributor for a micro-budget feature. The days of them laying out a bunch of cash are over, and the amount of companies that take on micro-budget features is, I would say, shrinking. It's a harder game. Okay, that's sort of my pitch on narrative. If any of you have questions, feel free to comment, or even you can email me. I'm pretty available if anyone wants to talk about how to plan these things out. Okay. Documentary, as someone who is doing feature narratives for many years, documentary is easier. It just is. It takes longer, but it's easier. And what do I mean by that? Well, VHS Massacre we shot on weekends with Ken Powell, and then Tim Kulig produced and did the score, and then Dave Lute and James Richardson helped out. And the way it would work is we would book an interview with Debbie Rochon, let's say. And Debbie Rochon produced VHS Massacre 1 and 2, by the way. We'd hire Debbie, and she got us an interview with Lloyd. So we do an interview with Debbie one weekend. Next month we do an interview with Lloyd. Next month we do an interview with the Found Footage Film Festival guys. And then like the next month, eventually we got Bob Briggs, and that was through Debbie Rochon. So big shout out to Debbie. She's an amazing producer and performer. If you ever need a good producer, she's worth hiring for sure. So basically that's how you can build a documentary. You have to have a clear focus of what you want in mind. We also did all these video store hunts. So sort of New York City was the backdrop of the film. So really the budget was just buying a few hard drives and, just hiring a few people to produce. And that was it. That was the whole budget. And the rest of the stuff, we were just kind of using the camera equipment we had at the time. Ken had a Blackmagic cinema camera. Ken had a Blackmagic cinema camera. And I think I was still using a Canon TI camera, just running around shooting with that thing. So the technology wasn't crazy, We used what we had. We had some decent audio equipment as well. So basically, you could say we gathered footage over the course of, I would say, 2 years by the time we kind of figured out the structure of the film. And then we were cutting the whole time. So the whole film took 2 or 3 years to make. Now, that's the thing you have to understand about feature-length filmmaking. If you're in the director's seat, the director-producer's seat, let's say, it's a 2 or 3 year process. And so if you're just used to cranking out YouTube videos and that's all you've been doing, and you can't dedicate to this type of long format, to making something work over the course of like an hour and 20 or an hour and a half, then you're going to have issues. Now, that being said, I've seen some hour-long content on YouTube, which is absolutely stellar. If you watch the guys, the guys who do GameSack, or Lady Decade, any of those people who do the gaming documentaries, they're stellar. They're super well made. But they are made sort of for a more YouTube audience, I think. That's not to say that that's bad, but what I try to take these more from my docs are made, I think, more from a film nerd angle. Anyway, so basically, when we put the doc together, you edit the thing, I cut the thing, and I'm showing many, many cuts to people over the course of a year, let's say, and I'm taking notes and I'm rearranging things, and I get it to a point where I think it's pretty good. Now, when we made this doc, there weren't that many there weren't that many documentaries about the VHS era. I think Adjust Your Tracking was one of the only ones out that was like distributed. And I still to this day have never seen it, but everyone says it's essentially more of a nostalgia trip on the whole VHS era. And at the time, we were 6 months into shooting, and ours was really more about decline of physical media and death of the video store and how that affected independent filmmaking. And we were 6 months into shooting when Rewind This, I think, hit South by Southwest, and I've yet to see it, but that kind of like mind fucked us, because we were like, dude, I don't know anything about this. We've been working on ours for a long time, and they had already had theirs finished, which means they probably started theirs before ours. I can't imagine them shooting and cutting within 6 months and cranking it out, so and I from what I understand, it's pretty good, but we didn't, our story was really like pretty personal, I was putting out a movie, and I got it on the shelf at Kim's Video. That was actually Mark of the Beast. We got it on the shelf at Kim's Video, and then Kim's Video went under, and then the last Blockbuster Video in New York went under. So the first VHS Massacre kind of chronicled that last Blockbuster in New York and Kim's Video. And so it did a lot of things that you would later see in films, like the movie called The Last Blockbuster came out about the last blockbuster in the world, you know. And I think things like VHS Massacre were pretty influential. But how did that happen? Okay, so we finished the film, and I burn a Blu-ray of it, and I send it off to only one distributor, and that's Troma Entertainment. Now, I had met Lloyd anecdotally, and I interviewed him a handful of times, but he's always very polite, but I never thought I was really buddy-buddy with him. So we mailed the thing in, and the people at Troma watched it, and they're like, yeah, we like this. It's funny, it's entertaining, and it has a lot of B movies in it. We're all about this. So basically, we signed a deal with Troma, and they took the documentary. And Troma has a very large built-in fan base. It probably has about 500,000 very dedicated, loyal fans. And that has essentially kept it going for the last 40-something years. 45 years? I don't even know. So suddenly it started getting attention through that. At the same time, Troma had a deal with this company called FilmRise. FilmRise is a very large distributor, one of the largest, and they were buying up digital properties to then relicense. And they had some really huge properties, like the biggest TV shows that you can think of, the biggest, some of the biggest movies you've heard of. They were buying up these properties and then relicensing to the streaming sites. And they had gone to Troma very often. People, when people are starting up companies like FilmRise, they go to companies like Troma, because Troma has a catalog of almost 1,000 films, and they basically had a deal to cherry pick some of the best Troma films for that they would then resell to streaming sites. So VHS Massacre was in a package of some of the Troma hits, probably some of the biggest ones, Class of Nuke High and Toxic Avenger and all that stuff. So FilmRise is this huge company that then becomes a middle person for Troma in order to access some of the major streaming sites. And then over the course of, because the movie came out in 2016, so over the course of time, eventually the film gets distributed on, goes on Troma Now. Bob Briggs' site picks it up, then Vudu and Walmart, then iTunes, then it's on Prime. I think the Blu-ray is sold out. Then it hits Mubi, which is this sort of art house streaming site, which I never thought would happen with that. That just seems so weird, because they really do like cherry pick some of the best sort of art house films. But they were doing this thing about Troma, calling them the vulgar disruptor, but then showing all these awesome movies like Toxic Avenger and Poultrygeist and stuff like that. And they mixed in VHS Massacre with that. And then on top of that, Tubi eventually took it, which is a free app, but it's a very good app, and a lot of people use it. And then just this week, I think, it popped up on Peacock TV. And Peacock TV, again, is like NBC Universal. It's like a major streaming site, from the old networks. NBC, pretty big deal. And so that's how that came to be. Okay, so think of it in terms of a couple guys make a movie for nothing. They give it to Troma. That's one company. That company then gives it to FilmRise. That's another company. That company then gives it to Peacock. You know, so if you count us in the process, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to get to this. Now, you could talk about revenues and how Eli Roth talked about this once in a good Troma talk that he gave. You could look it up on the Troma Entertainment channel. Basically he said essentially the turkey gets carved up so much that the filmmaker rarely ever sees any money, and that's true of this. But the difference is, I had gotten used to not getting paid out for independent filmmaking. Honestly, the revenues have dropped off so much that you really have to kind of do it because you love to do it. And making documentary was a way to stay in the film world and not like bleed money. So we were able to make these things for essentially nothing, but gain this interesting reputation and get played on these major streaming sites. So, you know, and if you think of NBC Universal is one of the largest film studios. It's like, wow, there's a $500 movie on Peacock, you know. So that's some of that, you know, that's how that came to be. That's the path that I took. And I'm very proud of it. Not even a humble brag. This is just a brag. It's been really satisfying to do that, because at the time when we were making VHS Massacre, I had basically nothing going on in my entertainment career. I had to take a job in academia and as a technician at the time, and I was not feeling very good about myself, and basically, you know, was broke and had nothing going on, and just really needed to keep working and keep making stuff. And so, and then as the video stores started crumbling, it kind of got worse and worse, but it got, you could almost say, better for the documentary, worse for my filmmaking ambitions. And I was hoping that I could make this doc and it wouldn't be such a bummer, but it would also convey information of, like, you know, there were filmmakers that came up in the 80s and 90s, and they really wanted to make independent films, and they were, like me, would have been more than happy just to make direct-to-video films and eke out a living, you know. But what happened is, like what happened with everything, VHS Massacre 2, the sequel, talks about this. When Blockbuster was a form of media consolidation that starved out the mom and pops. That kept a lot of variety and a lot of low budget and underground and edgy films from being profitable, because the mom and pop video stores were the fuel for that kind of stuff, because a lot of them would take the more crazier stuff. They'd take more of the Troma type stuff. And so the same thing happened now with streaming. We thought streaming was the last hope for independent filmmaking, and what happened was Netflix, that was built upon the backs of low budget, no budget film, closed the door on us, and then they were too cool for school. And essentially the same thing happens with starving out low budget content on the major streaming sites. Like, they either don't pay out, or we essentially just get pushed out of the market. And then it looks like that's happening on YouTube too, as well. Like, the smaller YouTube channels don't seem to be producing as much revenue and all this stuff. So it's always bad for art in general when things get too consolidated. And, you know, it's kind of hitting a breaking point now. You're seeing all these streaming sites are peaking, and they're in there's no money left, so they're not making as much shows, and people are canceling subscriptions. And I think we're seeing, this is sort of like the end of the Blockbuster era. We're seeing the peak of streaming. Not to say that it's going anywhere, but there's so much content, so much terrible content being generated. And I think sites like Netflix and like Disney are to blame for devaluing the feature film. Like, they really make you question the value of filmmaking altogether, because they make such horrible crappy content. And it just seems like they hire people who just don't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, the cinematographers do, the technicians do, but whoever is coming up with the ideas, the writing, a lot of it's so bad. There's only, on any given streaming service, there's only 2 or 3 good shows on the entire format, from it, whether it's Disney or Netflix or Hulu. There's only a few good shows on any one of those given channels, so it's really getting frustrating. That being said, Troma now is $4.99 streaming service with almost 1,000 films on there, so I would say check that out, because you'll definitely watch something on there if you download that. Anyway, look, so that's how I got going on my filmmaking career. I mean, look, do I have it nailed? I don't know. I'm actually working on a new project now, and we'll see what happens with it. I may go back to narrative filmmaking. Who knows? The only thing you can do as an artist is to keep pushing and to keep making. And ultimately, you don't know what people are going to like, and you don't know what's going to hit. When I made VHS Massacre, I felt compelled to do it. And the goal was really just to make something good enough for Troma to take, because I always wanted to work with Troma. And I got my wish, and I made the sequel, VHS Massacre 2. I made the original series Monster Kill for them. And so it's been a real delight, and I'm hoping I can keep working with them in the future, because it's really fulfilled me as someone who grew up on Troma films. The only thing I really wanted to do is to be a filmmaker, and I wanted to do my own stuff. I didn't want to go through some studio committee to have my ideas and projects sort of chopped up and mainstreamed. And so I've always just wanted to do the process, to make films, and I never liked any of the minutia and the schmoozing and the fundraising or any of that stuff. So, it's been a delight. And I would recommend to filmmakers out there, whether you're doing some special interest doc that Troma might like, or you're doing some kind of low-budget horror, the thing you will have if you sign up with Troma, you're not going to make any money, but you probably will be embraced by the Troma fan base, and that's really awesome. So anyway, all right, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.